And here we've arrived at the first significant status quo changing book of the series. Not only does Tigerclaw's plot come to fruition, but Graystripe leaves, and on the meta level, we have a new author! Let's get into this one. Forest of Secrets released on the 14th of October, 2003. 4.5 months after the second book and 9 months after the first. It is also, more importantly, the first book written by Cherith Baldry. This is another fresh start on the writing department, and like Into the Wild, it comes with a lot of plot advances to get through. Unlike Into the Wild, though, the various character dramas going on are perhaps equally as important, which lets Cherith start off with her own unique set of strengths and faults. As for what those are, well, let's start with the story. We begin with a short prologue between Oakheart and Greypool, two Riverclane cats speaking about a couple mystery kits with unknown pasts that Greypool agrees to care for. We then move back to Fireheart 3 days after the ending of the last book. He is now set in his knowledge that Graystripe is his friend that he will be loyal to despite all shortcomings, and that Tigerclaw is a problem he really needs to deal with. For this reason, Fireheart and Graystripe take a secret impromptu journey back to Barley's farm to speak with Ravenpaw and get the full story about Redtail's death. As it turns out, Oakheart was killed by a rockfall, not by Redtail, so the most unbelievable part of the original story is gone. It's also here that they find out about the connection between Stonefur and ThunderClan, which starts off the second mission of the book. Solve this mystery. When they come back, Fireheart and Graystripe are punished for being well-fed, and Fireheart has a dream with Spottedleaf, saying that water can quench fire. They go together to the heart of Riverclan territory to speak with Silverstream and confirm the story. She doesn't know about it, though, so she brings Mistyfoot, who we learn knows about the relationship between Graystripe and Silverstream and disapproves, effectively making her Riverclan's Fireheart equivalent. Mistyfoot confirms it was an accident, but wants to bring in her mother Greypool to find out what Stonefur's connection to ThunderClan was, and that requires coming back to RiverClan on another day. Brightpaw and Thornpaw become apprentices, to Whitestorm and Mousefur respectively, and then Fireheart finally learns that Mistyfoot and Stonefur are from ThunderClan. With this information, Fireheart goes for take 2 of telling Bluestar about Tigerclaw killing Redtail, which she nearly believes until Fireheart adds in the ThunderClan kits bit, for which she gets defensive and kicks him out. At this point, Fireheart defaults back to the casual clan interactions, going herb gathering with Cinderheart, where she decides to be a full medicine cat, teaching Cloudkid about his kitty pet heritage, and patrolling with Graystripe and Sandstorm. After yet another Spottedleaf dream, silent this time, a flood happens and Graystripe and Fireheart save some RiverClan kits and start giving them prey, which they quickly get in trouble for. ShadowClan and WindClan get very angry with ThunderClan for sheltering Brokentail. They decide to attack, and Brackenpaw proves himself enough to become Brackenfur. Graystripe, however, wasn't at the battle and gets an earful from Tigerclaw for it. Also, Silverstream has Graystripe's kits and dies in the process, much to Cinderpaw's dismay, making Graystripe's secret RiverClan romance not so secret anymore. Speaking of not secrets, it is revealed that Mistyfoot and Stonefur are Bluestar's kits. Cloudpaw is apprenticed to Fireheart, and he finally gets to meet his mother. RiverClan tries to take Graystripe and Silverstream's kits multiple times, but before we can conclude that plot, Tigerclaw finally makes his move and attacks ThunderClan's mostly unguarded camp, using his position as deputy to get almost every cat away. While the rogues busy everyone else at camp, he attacks Bluestar himself and is cut off by Fireheart, who neutralizes him and, once the battle is finished, tells every cat about his treachery. Tigerclaw immediately reveals himself, saying he hates not only Fireheart but Bluestar as well, thinking of both of them as weak and useless. He then goes to Darkstripe, Longtail, and Dustpelt and asks them to come with him, which they all refuse for different reasons. Tigerclaw leaves with a promise of revenge, and soon after, Graystripe does too, bringing his kits to RiverClan like they wanted. Fireheart is made deputy late since Bluestar isn't feeling that great, and the book ends. It is, at this point, difficult to tell the exact differences in this book that are due to a different author's style, rather than to the different type of outline the book follows. The through lines in this book are about equally balanced between character drama and plot developments, where Into the Wild focused almost entirely on the overarching plot, and Fire and Ice stepped back to deal with smaller conflicts and developing the characters. However, we can take note of this book's strengths and flaws for later. As usual, we will start with basic clan changes. Cinderpaw is officially listed as a medicine cat apprentice. Yay! We have 10 warriors now, since Sandstorm and Dustpelt have joined the roster, but amazingly, still 5 apprentices. Sandpaw, Dustpaw, and Cinderpaw have been replaced with newcomers Cloudpaw, Brightpaw, and Thornpaw. The leadership roles, queens, and elders are also identical, save for Brokentail now being listed with the elders as he's being held prisoner in the camp. The top 10 characters this time get around 81% of the lines. Again, a drop in the right direction, though not as large a jump as Fire and Ice's. The issue, though, comes in the gender distribution. Only 38% of the characters for this book are she-cats, and they only get 35% of the lines, despite the many, many RiverClan she-cats taking up a large part of this book. Seriously, this book could make you believe Crooked Star is the only Tom left in the clan. The cast size is smaller than Fire and Ice's overall, which makes sense as it would likely be difficult to take on such a large group for your first book into this world. I'll reserve any judgment until Cherith has had more time to get acquainted with writing for the series. In addition to the different balance of plot and character time, this is also the first book with a mystery, or at least the characters seeking out the answer to a mystery that the readers may have already understood. The prologue and much of the book's time is dedicated to finding out who Mistyfoot and Stonefur are, or were, Bluestar's kits. It is pretty easy to figure out, especially given the sheer number of clues pointing to the answer, but it is interesting to have a new style that may be brought back at other points in the series. On a less happy note, welcome to the first Warriors retcon! Yes, it only took 3 books for a rewriting of canon to be necessary. In Into the Wild, at a gathering, Ravenpaw describes Redtail running away with blood dripping from his mouth and his fur torn, immediately after Oakheart's death, implying Redtail killed Oakhart. He later clarifies to Firepaw explicitly that Redtail killed Oakhart, and just as Redtail was watching RiverClan run away, Tigerclaw killed him. However, in Forest of Secrets, Ravenpaw says they were both hit by a rockfall. Oakhart died, but Redtail came out completely unharmed, and he ran into Tigerclaw instead of Tigerclaw creeping up on him. Graystripe calls him on messing up at Book 1's gathering, but Fireheart doesn't mention his clear statement to the contrary, and that part is never explained. Because the rest of this book and the arc story hinges on Redtail not, in fact, murdering Oakhart, it is generally accepted that this version of the events is what truly happened, but the fact that we have to retroactively make a choice about which canon to take as fact is already a slight problem. There is one other thing that isn't a retcon, at least not yet since it's the first time we've ever seen it, but it will become important to check on much later. This is the book where Bluestar explains the story of her, Oakhart, and how their kits came to be in RiverClan. As far as we're told, from her, Oakhart and Bluefur met at a gathering in early Leafbear. They were both young and weren't mates for long. She intended to keep the kits for ThunderClan and simply not say who the father was, something that wasn't required by the clan's culture. This makes sense with Arc 1's depiction of the queens, as they haven't yet mentioned any of the kits' fathers, and no one seems to mind. The deputy of ThunderClan in Bluefur's time, Tawny Spots, decided to retire, and Bluefur knew she had a good chance of getting the promotion if not for her kits. The Medicine Cat had explicitly told her StarClan had a great destiny for her. ThunderClan, meanwhile, was half-starved in the middle of Leafbear, and Bluefur knew RiverClan, with their plentiful fish population, would care for them well. As a side note, after Fireheart Prize, she mentions Thistleclaw, a fine, strong, and brave warrior who solved every problem with a fight. Something not especially problematic, given how often we know the clans fight in this arc. He was also ready to be deputy. Bluefur didn't want to see him as the leader of the clan, so with all of this, Bluefur made the tough decision to give them away. She met Oakhart and gave away 2 of her kits. The third, well, he wasn't able to survive the journey to RiverClan. None of this is in conflict with anything now, but I'd ask you to remember it when we come back to a certain Leader's Super Edition. As for interesting details in the story, it's worth noting that the elders are shown speaking peaceably at gatherings, and this is said to be a normal occurrence. They are shown to have more camaraderie with each other than the warriors, standing mostly apart from clan tensions. Barley's barn is very easy to hunt in, full of mice and starkly different from the supposedly barren Leafbear. The starvation Leafbear sets in is talked about a fair bit as something that should happen, and Princess does point out how thin Fireheart is, but it's seen as normal, and in the same scene, Fireheart just happens to catch a mouse without trying. In every example we are shown, there seems to be no real effect of Leafbear beyond the prey being thinner or less tasty. A natural event like a flood is seen as bigger than any one clan, at least by Bluestar. She demands there be a peace between ThunderClan and RiverClan while they try to combat the threat, and Crooked Star reciprocates. This book features the second mini-prophecy Spotted Leaf directly gives to Fireheart, just as vague as the first, and Fireheart is still incapable of interpreting them correctly or in any way that would affect his decisions. Kits are allowed out of camp. Cinderpaw casually invites Cloudtail to follow herself and Fireheart on an herb-gathering mission, and this is perfectly fine. Speaking of Cloudkit, he is still the only named kid in camp, and as such he is also the focus of every kit scene, possibly with a couple other nameless, faceless kits added in as other players. Kits are also at this point allowed, and even encouraged, to be mentored by their kin. Bluestar gives Cloudpaw to Fireheart, citing their kinship as a reason for the pair, and tells Graystripe he can one day mentor his kits. Speaking of Graystripe, he has solidly taken on the role of Fireheart's dedicated best friend and sidekick. Fireheart refuses to betray him for anything, and he does finally start joining Fireheart on all the missions, from going to see Ravenpaw to journeying into RiverClan to learn the secret of Bluestar's kits. They feel far more like a unit. However, that isn't quite reflected in Graystripe's behavior. Fireheart takes too much responsibility from Tigerclaw and Bluestar for Graystripe's actions, has to train his apprentice for him, and still seems to be going along with Graystripe and Silverstream's narrative that they can't stop seeing each other. They can. They just won't. It should be Graystripe's responsibility to deal with the consequences of his actions. If the reader does consider Graystripe to have his own agency, he seems like a terrible cat, especially since Graystripe hasn't had any grief for being friends with Fireheart, while Fireheart has taken a lot of pains for Graystripe's sake. Moving on from him, Tigerclaw is definitely evil again. He's actively spreading rumors about Fireheart's disloyalty, hating half-clan cats as well as kitty pets, and tries to murder Fireheart through inaction in one of the chapters. All of this before he actually attacks the camp, along with Bluestar and Fireheart. Tigerclaw is really menacing on the daily. He gets mad at Fireheart for coming back late from a gathering, saying hello to a queen, being anywhere near him in the forest, and is generally looking for any excuse to punish him. It is also clear that, in the background, Tigerclaw was plotting since at least the middle of the book to kill Bluestar with the rogue attack. At this point, he's a good enough villain. As for the lackeys, Darkstripe is mean and outspoken, willing to even insult his own leader rather than just being mean to kitty pets like Longtail. When he refuses Tigerclaw's offer at the end of the book, it is only because Tigerclaw didn't include him in his plan. Longtail, meanwhile, is overly aggressive, like in Into the Wild, this time actively teasing Fireheart and Graystripe when they're made to do apprentice duties, but he saves Fireheart's life when Tigerclaw won't, and when he refuses Tigerclaw's offer, he cites his loyalty to the clan. Fireheart also concludes he is a coward, but Fireheart would be biased against him given their relationship, and we in fact will see him being just that in later books. As for Tigerclaw's third friend, Dustpelt, where the heck did you go? When he refuses Tigerclaw's offer, he gives a powerful statement that showed Tigerclaw was no longer someone he could look up to, and that Tigerclaw is effectively dead in his eyes after Redtail's murder and everything else he's done. But that was the only time in the whole book where he spoke. Weren't you one of the original apprentices in Fireheart's generation? Shouldn't you be doing something? Speaking of cats that are strangely absent, you could forget Whitestorm exists while reading most of this book. He reports a few matters with single-line phrases to Bluestar and hangs out with her a couple times to show their friendship, but that's it. However, in the last section, once Fireheart is made deputy, he shows himself to be humble and wise, gratefully congratulating Fireheart and giving bits of advice where he feels it is needed, given Fireheart's youth and inexperience. Much like her mentor, Brightpaw is also nearly absent from this book, despite her just being introduced to the series. She had one scene where Fireheart learned she went on her first solo hunting mission, and she paused anxiously to make sure it was okay she took her prey straight to the elders, and otherwise, like Whitestorm, you could forget she's part of the clan. Her brother Thornpaw, however, is eager and dedicated, spamming Mousefur with questions immediately after his ceremony, before Brightpaw has even been named, and is a talented cat. He saved Fireheart from a rogue during Tigerclaw's attack, only nodding in acknowledgement and not sticking around to be praised further. Duty first, Thornpaw. I like it. Sandstorm isn't developed a ton in this book, but she is tight and mean to Graystripe once she finds out he's had a half-clan relationship. She has warmed up to Fireheart, though, so it seems she ultimately values loyal behavior over clan birth or blood. Brackenpaw is a dutiful and adorably loyal apprentice, defending Graystripe even from things he has actually done, which makes it sad that Graystripe doesn't care for him nearly as much. It is Fireheart who finally recognizes Brackenpaw's prowess and recommends that he be a warrior. Graystripe wasn't even at the battle to see him fight. When Fireheart finally realizes this, he understands it to be an unequivocally bad thing, and feels sorry for Brackenpaw. Let's see if anyone remembers this. Swiftpaw actually doesn't speak in this book, but we're told he told the other clans ThunderClan was sheltering Brokenstar, leading to ShadowClan and WindClan attacking them. Not super responsible. Cloudkit is quite reckless and entitled, but he's very sweet and surprisingly talented for his age. Pretty lovable among the clan, putting aside his kitty petness. Goldenflower is pregnant! Something not pointed out with any of the other queens before. Additionally, Willowpelt becomes pregnant and moves to the nursery at the end of the book, this time with a guaranteed father, Whitestorm. It's nice to think of this as a move towards giving more care to the characters in the nursery. Forest of Secrets is something of a turning point for the first arc, and a memorable book even years down the line. Tigerclaw and Graystripe aren't in the clan anymore, Fireheart is deputy, Cinderpaw is sworn in as a medicine cat, and Bluestar has been shaken to her core, with all of her past laid out for us to see. It was an interesting one to read through, and it will be even more interesting to see all the effects of this book ripple out through the next entries in our trip through time.